Hi everyone, Harry here to talk about the investigation of the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. All right, so this is now a law enforcement matter, so not your typical fare of a particular prosecution, but it is down the middle DOJ and very much within my ken of experience. First point to note, I was U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania. This event, this attempted assassination took place in the Western District of Pennsylvania, about 40 miles from Pittsburgh, in a community that I know quite well. Second point, the shooter is actually from a kind of bedroom community in Pittsburgh, a community of some 33,000 people, and an average income per household of about $100,000. Not, in other words, the first thing your mind thinks of when you hear about a shooting in somewhat rural Pennsylvania that is a lone, white, poor male from a rural community who maybe has gotten caught up in some of the domestic terrorism activity that really is, as it turns out, rife in the rural pockets of all of Pennsylvania. The saw goes, Pennsylvania is Pittsburgh to the west, Philadelphia to the east, Alabama in between, and to the extent you endorse that, it's in that Alabama region that you see a fair bit, and I saw a fair bit as U.S. Attorney of domestic terrorism. Third, I want to try to describe what is happening now, because there are two really big and separate questions. So there is a investigation of a crime. It's not a casual matter when the FBI opens a file and says there was an attempted assassination of a former president, a serious federal crime. That's something that exists and must be closed out. And it was very telling to former law enforcement or law enforcement folks that the FBI, which had not had a role and doesn't have a role in the protection of candidates in these sorts of events, had moved in and asserted control over the investigation. They have now been not displaced, but, well, they have been displaced from the very top perch of who's running this, because point four, and the thing I really want to drive home, the Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland, has cleared his schedule and put himself atop this investigation. I saw him do this in Oklahoma City. He means business. He is intense and deeply focused and will be really marshaling. So the FBI is now just one agency that is reporting to him, along with the ATF, and they are there because there were explosives found in Crooks, the shooter's car, and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of Pennsylvania, my old office, which has now got the ticket for, if there were a federal crime here, that's where it would be brought. Now you might ask, what are the prospects for a federal crime here when the obvious perpetrator is dead and had his head blown away? And it's a fair point, but not a conclusive one, because a file was opened and there's a national urgency to know and a bureaucratic justification to know what the hell happened, because, and this is point five, this guy seems to me more of a lone wolf than anybody we've seen to date, which is why my mind went immediately to an explanation about mental illness. Well, not immediately. What one's mind immediately in these events goes to explanations about being caught up in domestic terrorism. So my first thought is, I want to see the social media. I want to see his crazy interactions with other crazy people. And there may be those. The FBI now has the phone, which was password protected, but is going through it. But every indication we have so far, including the FBI's first saying, which is their first order of business, and they wouldn't do lightly, that they don't think there is any greater risk out there, because if he had known Confederates who were working with him, then they wouldn't have said that, and it would be their total focus to, find and immobilize those folks. So we really have, it seems to me, from the outside, but applying my kind of, intuition, having been right in the middle, that this guy seems to be really a lone wolf. You're hearing classmates say, not a crazy guy they wanted to report to the authorities, but a quiet guy on his own. But there's some really unanswered questions about what was his motive. How the hell did he make the plans to do this? Did he train? Did he practice? We're told he didn't make the high school rifle team, which is a big deal, I can report to you, in Butler. I know that sounds crazy to some. How did he plan it all? So there's, all that part about, we now know about the gun. It looks like a good old AR-15 from his father, who possesses over a dozen guns. His father so far is just talking to law enforcement and nobody else. But those are the elements of the crime, even though it's not going to end in charges, that the Department of Justice, under the direct whip hand, as well as, driving force of Merrick Garland, who has a lot of intensity here. And I just want to say it's important. It says a lot that Garland takes charge of it, because he sees this. He's a guy with a zeal for public service. He got into public service for certain important reasons, and he sees this, and he called it, at the Department of Justice, an attack on democracy. So it's all this violent stuff that is happening, much of which, I don't want to get into this specific debate now, but much of which at the instance of Trump supporters, that Garland feels, the Department of Justice has a really critical role to play with respect to the critical nature of an American society where disputes are talked through and not subject to violence. Okay, so that's what the investigation will be, and it's under Garland, and they ought to be able to get to the bottom of things. There are not that many moving parts here. Who Crooks was, how he got to this point. It shouldn't be all that hard. I expect we'll be hearing soon. Now, what have I not mentioned so far? Secret Service, but the absolute breathtaking dereliction that Crooks was in a line of sight of the former president of the United States from about 150 yards. I've gone out. It's pretty, Western Pennsylvania, big political focus. So often these sorts of events, I've participated in them. Indeed, an assistant U.S. attorney may have been driving along. They always offer that. I've been there when people have done assessments of a particular site. And the whole thing here, 98% of the whole thing, somebody stands where the speaker's going to be, and you look for lines of sight, lines of sight, lines of sight, lines of sight. Where everywhere can there be somebody with a line of sight on in this case, the former president? And it's mind-boggling, and anyone with experience in these situations is concurring here that this guy somehow was able to have a line of sight about 150 yards from Trump. That's only a little bit more than Oswald had for Kennedy in '63, and of course, technology of rifles was way less accurate then. And we're also finding out additional things that really make things look worse for the Secret Service, including that it's, last word, 86 seconds maybe from when they can say people in the audience knew there's a guy up there with a gun and when the shooting actually occurred. What the hell was, so two big things. How did the Secret Service permit a line of sight to be vulnerable that way? You've heard initial reports. They were not, I think, very tellingly at the first press conference. They left that to the FBI. They know that they're in, really under very, very harsh scrutiny. So that first part is one, but then you've seen some suggestions from them that, well, that part was was local law enforcement. Secret Service is all about protecting the site, protecting the former president, and knowing the vulnerabilities. So some terribly egregious thing happened there. And then in the actual event, you can't, of course, just anytime you see someone blow them away, but that's a long time where really essentially nothing happened. There's even a suggestion that there were local law enforcement in the very building where Crooks is climbing on the roof. So this whole matter, however, is both really exigent. This second half, it's bifurcated. Why is that? A few reasons, but the number one thing to understand here in the very bureaucratic organization of the federal government, the Secret Service is housed under the Department of Homeland Security. Alejandro Mayorkas, not Merrick Garland, and that means that's how the investigation will occur. Not necessarily a great thing for the Secret Service. Among other things, they are going to be called on the carpet and soon by members of Congress. And the obvious political angle, and it looks like it dovetails with the merits, is to absolutely crucify them. But the point I just wanted to make for purposes of this, because I don't think it's been clearly explained in the public discussions, is that's a separate thing under a separate part of the alphabet soup of the federal government. The White House has been involved in getting briefed often by Garland. It's not as if they're completely blind one to another, but Garland is now all over the investigation of what happened as a criminal matter, and it'll be the Department of Homeland Security, but with all kinds of handpecking by Congress, et cetera, that'll focus in the first instance on the Secret Service. And it's really clear from the public comments to date, they are really, really, really going to be in the hot seat. Okay, so I just wanted to explain some of those things which were obvious to me just because I was the U.S. attorney there and I know how these things sort of work, and I feel they've been given only short shrift in the cable coverage to date. If anything else seems important along those lines, I'll be back. But for now, that's the lay of the land with these two separate essential parts. One, Secret Service, Department of Homeland Security. The other, just what happened here. And it's technically the crime of attempted assassination that lies with the Department of Justice under the leadership and the very, very focused leadership, I'm here to tell you, of Merrick Garland. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.